Okay, so imagine this.
Okay.
A clinical trial where researchers are just drowning in paperwork. Patients feel like they're lab rats, not really partners in the process, and all these promising new therapies are stuck in this maze of bureaucracy. Not exactly ideal, and this is the very problem that ICH-E6R3 is aiming to solve. It's
Right.
basically revamping the instruction manual for clinical trials in the 21st century.
It really is a pretty major update.
Uh-huh.
It's not just tweaking a few things.
Right.
The last major revision, it was back when dial-up was still the normal way to get online.
Oh, wow.
The research landscape has totally transformed since then.
Right.
And the old guidelines just couldn't keep up.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like we're talking about more than just a simple software update.
Exactly.
This is like adapting to a whole new reality in research.
It is,
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Sure.
can we maybe back up a bit for our listener?
of course.
ICH-E6R3.
Or-
I know it has something to do with good clinical practice.
Yeah, good clinical practice, or GCP for short.
GCP, okay.
Basically, the gold standard for doing clinical trials the right way. So they're ethical and the science is sound.
So it's like the rule book to make sure everything's done right.
Exactly.
Protecting the patients, making sure the data is reliable.
All of that.
And the R3 part just means this is the third time they've gone back and revised those guidelines.
That's right, third revision.
But why now? What's driving this need for an update?
The world of clinical trials is just constantly evolving.
Mm.
Technology's changing everything. Regulations are always trying to keep up. And there's this growing focus on really putting patients at the heart of it all.
Yeah, I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal.
It is.
This update.
Yeah.
It's about making sure those guidelines are still relevant.
But what are people really buzzing about? What makes ICH E6R3?
One of the biggest things is this shift toward what we call risk-based quality management, or RBQM. Instead of this rigid one-size-fits-all approach, it encourages researchers to pinpoint the most critical risks and then tailor your approach to those specific risks.
So it's more about being strategic. Instead of just stressing over every little detail, it's about focusing on what really matters.
Precisely.
Can you maybe give an example of how that might work in practice?
Sure, let's say you're doing a trial for a new cancer drug with RBQM. Instead of documenting every tiny temperature change in the fridge, you can focus on making sure patients are getting the right dose and being monitored closely for side effects.
I see. So it's about
Being smart,
prioritizing.
it's the things that could actually impact patient safety or the data.
That's it.
So it's like less bureaucracy, more targeted effort, potentially faster results.
Potentially.
Yes, sounds like a win for everyone involved.
Definitely a step in the right direction.
And this is just one of the ways ICH-E6R3 is trying to improve the whole clinical trial process.
It is.
But it's not just about efficiency. It's also about making sure that data is top-notch,
Absolutely.
especially in the age of big data, right? It needs to be accurate, organized, trustworthy.
It does.
And that's where data governance comes in, right?
Yeah, it's a big part of it.
ICH-E6R3 seems to put a lot of emphasis on that.
It does, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Because robust data governance is crucial for making sure the science behind new treatments is solid.
So we can actually trust the results.
Exactly.
So if we're going to make informed decisions about which therapies to use,
Yeah.
we need to be confident in that data. So it sounds like data governance is like the unsung hero of clinical research. It's the behind-the-scenes work that makes sure everything's credible
It's the foundation.
and trustworthy.
Exactly.
And ICH-E6R3 is providing a framework for doing that.
It is.
Okay, so we've got RBQM for efficiency, data governance for making sure things are accurate and reliable.
Yep.
Any other big changes that really stand out in ICH-E6R3?
One of the most exciting changes, I think,
Yeah.
is this focus on flexibility and adaptability.
Okay,
The old guidelines, they could be pretty rigid.
I see.
It made it tough to incorporate new tech and new approaches.
And things are changing so fast.
Exactly.
So ICH-E6R3 recognizes that not all trials are the same,
It does.
and it allows for more tailoring
Yeah, more flexibility.
in the design and how they're run.
Right.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. What are some of the potential benefits of that flexibility?
For starters, it opens the door to more creative trial designs,
Okay,
more patient-centric designs.
like what?
Think decentralized trials,
Yeah.
where patients can participate from home.
Oh, wow.
Remote monitoring using wearables, integrating real-world evidence.
So it's about making trials more accessible, more efficient, more relevant to the real world.
Exactly.
That's a pretty significant shift.
It is.
But I'm also thinking about potential challenges. Could this flexibility also lead to inconsistencies?
That's a valid concern, and the guidelines actually address that head on. While promoting flexibility, they also really stress the importance of transparency and documentation. So researchers need to be very clear about their choices and provide detailed info about how the trial is designed and run.
So it's about
Maintaining that rigor.
balancing that need for flexibility
Yes.
with making sure that the results are still reliable.
And comparable across different
Yeah.
studies.
So it's a bit of a tightrope walk.
It is,
Yeah.
but the potential benefits are huge.
In terms of innovation, patient centricity.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm starting to see the potential here.
Good.
But I think it's important to acknowledge that putting these new guidelines into practice
Yeah.
on a global scale
It's a big task.
is no easy feat.
It's not.
What are some of the hurdles we need to be prepared for as ICH E6 R3 rolls out?
One of the biggest challenges is simply changing mindsets.
Right.
Some people are always resistant to change,
Of course.
and moving away from familiar ways of doing things can be tough. So making sure everyone involved really understands and embraces these new principles. That's crucial.
So it's not just about giving them the new rule book.
It's not.
It's about really fostering this culture of
Continuous improvement, a willingness to adapt.
what else do we need to think about as we navigate this transition?
Training and education are going to be absolutely essential.
Because,
You can't just expect people to follow new guidelines if
Yeah.
they don't understand them. Exactly.
okay, so knowledge, skills, a solid ethical foundation.
Those are key.
Those are the ingredients for successful implementation.
They are.
What about the role of technology in all of this?
Technology is a big part of why we need these updates, and it's going to play a huge role in how we implement them. But it's not just about having the latest gadgets.
No, it's about using them effectively,
Exactly.
responsibly.
Yes.
Because technology is a tool, it's not a solution in and of itself. It can help streamline processes, improve the data, make things better for patients,
Absolutely.
but only if it's implemented thoughtfully.
Thoughtfully and strategically.
So it actually makes sense in the context of the research.
Exactly.
Okay, so this raises some interesting questions about how tech, especially AI,
Oh, yeah.
is going to shape things moving forward.
It is.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's pause for a moment. Let our listener process everything.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground, the need for these updated guidelines, the key changes, the challenges. When we come back, we'll explore what this all means for emerging economies
Sounds good.
and dive into some more of those specifics
Okay.
of ICH E6 R3.
Looking forward to it.
So welcome back.
Back again.
Before the break, we were talking about all the big changes with ICH E6 R3,
Right.
streamlined risk management, focus on data quality.
Mm-hmm.
But we also mentioned this isn't just about updating rules for the usual players in research. What about places where clinical trials are just getting started?
Yeah.
Emerging economies, how does ICH E6 R3 fit into that picture?
That's a really important question because as research becomes more global, we need to make sure these standards of quality and ethics are being upheld everywhere.
Yeah.
ICHE 6R3 isn't about creating a two-tier system. It's about raising the bar for everyone.
So it's not a hand-me-down rulebook for these regions.
No, not at all.
It's an opportunity to really build capacity, expertise from the ground up, making sure research in these emerging economies meets the same standards as anywhere else.
Exactly.
That's a big task though, right?
It is.
What are some of the unique challenges those regions might face?
One key concern is ethical conduct, making sure we're protecting patient rights,
Right.
promoting informed consent,
Yeah.
avoiding any kind of exploitative practices.
That's crucial.
Absolutely crucial no matter where the research is happening.
So that requires building strong ethical review systems,
It does.
fostering a culture of integrity in research,
Yes,
which can be tough
it can.
in places with limited resources
Mhm.
or where the research infrastructure is still developing.
That's right.
It's like building a house. You need a good foundation, or you can add all the fancy features. And in this case, that foundation is ethical conduct, strong oversight. But even with the best intentions, I imagine resource constraints could be a huge hurdle for these economies trying to implement these guidelines. Putting ICH E6 R3 into practice takes investment, infrastructure, training, technology, and that can be a lot for regions that might already be stretched thin.
especially with healthcare budgets
Yeah.
and competing priorities.
So it's not just about giving them the new instruction manual. It's about providing support, resources, expertise to help them really build up that capacity. It sounds like it takes a global effort. Regulators, sponsors, research institutions, everyone working together
It's a partnership.
to support these emerging economies.
Exactly.
And it's not just about money. It's about sharing knowledge, best practices.
It's about collaboration.
So it's about fostering this sense of a global community, recognizing we all benefit from making sure clinical research is done ethically to the highest standards, no matter where it's happening. But let's shift gears for a moment. We talked about the big changes in ICH E6, R3, but I'm curious about some of the finer details, the nuances that might not be so obvious,
Sure.
but could still have a big impact on how trials are done. What are some of the hidden gems, so to speak?
One detail that I think is really interesting is this idea of acceptable ranges for quality metrics.
What does that mean?
So instead of having these strict pass-fail criteria,
Right.
ICH E6 R3 recognizes there can be some variability in how trials are run,
Okay.
as long as the overall integrity and the objectives of the study are still maintained.
So it's like giving researchers a little more breathing room.
In a way, yes.
Recognizing that not every little deviation is a disaster. It's about the spirit of the guidelines,
Yes.
not just the letter of the law.
That's a good way to put it.
Are there any other subtle shifts like that?
There's also a move away from using the term errors
Oh, interesting.
and instead focusing on harms or hazards. Subtle, but I think it's an important shift.
It reflects a different way of thinking about risk.
It does.
So instead of just counting mistakes,
Right.
it's about understanding what those mistakes could actually lead to.
The potential consequences.
Exactly. Prioritizing the things that could actually harm participants
Right.
or compromise the research
Exactly.
instead of getting caught up in minor details that don't really matter.
That's the idea.
This sounds like a step towards a more pragmatic approach,
Is
patient-centric.
absolutely.
But I can't let you go without asking about AI. How is artificial intelligence shaping ICH E6 R3?
That's a big question. And it's one that a lot of people are talking about because AI has the potential to really change things.
How?
It can streamline data management, enhance safety monitoring, even personalized treatment.
So it could be a game changer.
It could,
But with great power comes great responsibility, right?
always.
What are some of the things we need to be mindful of?
One of the biggest concerns is data privacy. As AI becomes more sophisticated, we have to be extra careful about protecting patient information.
Right, no Skynet scenarios in our clinical trial. Data security is paramount.
It is.
It's not just about patient privacy either.
But-
It's about the integrity of the research. If the AI is trained on bad data,
Yeah. Biased data, flawed data.
the results won't be reliable.
Exactly.
It's like building a house on a shaky foundation. Doesn't matter how fancy the house is, if the foundation's weak.
The whole thing falls apart.
What other challenges do we need to consider as AI becomes more common in research?
There's also the issue of algorithmic bias.
Okay.
AI is only as good as the data it's trained on. And if that data reflects existing biases, then the AI can actually perpetuate those biases.
Which could lead to unfair outcomes.
It could, exactly.
So it's not just about having the tech.
No.
It's about using it responsibly.
Responsibly and ethically.
Making sure it doesn't make existing disparities worse.
That's a key point.
What about the fact that some of these AI algorithms are so complex?
Yes.
It can be hard to understand how they're reaching their conclusions.
That's a valid concern.
That's a problem for clinical trials, right?
They can be.
Where transparency is so important.
Transparency and accountability.
If we're going to trust AI to help make decisions about new treatments, we need to be able to understand how it's making those decisions. It can't just be a black box that spits out results. We need to be able to look inside.
And see the reasoning. And that's why researchers are working on ways to make AI more transparent, more interpretable.
So we can actually understand what's going on.
Exactly.
It sounds like navigating AI in clinical trials
Just tricky.
is a bit of a tightrope walk, balancing the potential
The immense
with
fidelity.
the need to be cautious, responsible,
Absolutely.
and really understanding its limitations.
I agree.
This is just the beginning, right?
Oh yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
As AI keeps evolving, we can expect even bigger changes
Definitely.
in how we design, run, and regulate clinical trials.
It's a whole new world.
It's exciting,
It is.
but also a little daunting.
a little bit.
I think we need to let our listener digest all of this.
Oh.
We've covered so
All right.
much.
Global implications, risk management, the role of AI.
Yep.
When we come back for the final part of our deep dive,
Looking forward to it.
we'll bring it all together.
And explore what it all means for the future.
Sounds good.
All right, welcome back.
It's good to be back.
We've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Key changes, potential benefits, challenges ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But now I want to step back and ask,
Okay.
what does it all mean? What's the big takeaway
Yeah.
for our listener
Yeah.
who's trying to make sense of all of this?
You're right. We've thrown a lot at them.
We have.
RBQM, data governance, AI.
It's a lot.
It can be overwhelming. But if I had to boil it down to
Yeah.
one key message,
Oh.
it would be this. ICH E6 R3 isn't just a set of rules.
Okay.
It's more like a philosophy
A call to action.
for everyone involved in research to really embrace
Mhm.
this more proactive, patient-centric, quality-driven approach.
So it's not just about checking boxes
No,
or complying with regulations.
it's bigger than that.
It's about really shifting the culture of research,
Yeah,
making it
more responsive to the needs of patients
to the real world.
and the realities of this ever-changing world we live in.
Okay, I'm starting to get the big picture,
Good.
but let's get practical.
Sure.
What does this actually look like day to day for researchers, sponsors, and most importantly,
Yes.
patients?
For researchers, it means embracing new tools and technologies,
Okay,
things that streamline their workflow, improve data quality,
like what kind of things?
electronic data capture systems, remote monitoring platforms, AI-powered analytics, things like that.
So less paperwork, more insights.
You got it.
I don't think researchers will complain about that. But it's not just about making things easier for researchers, right?
Of course not.
It's about improving the experience for patients.
Absolutely.
That's where the real impact is.
That's the ultimate goal.
So less burden on the patient, more of a voice for them. Can you paint a picture of what that might look like?
Sure. Imagine a world where clinical trials are actually designed
Okay.
with the patient's needs and preferences in mind, where participating is less disruptive to their lives. They have access to information about the trial whenever they want it, and their feedback is actually valued.
It is. But change takes time.
It always does.
What are some of the hurdles we need to overcome?
One of the biggest is resistance to change.
People are comfortable with how things have always been done,
It's human nature.
so we need to overcome that inertia, foster a culture of continuous improvement.
Absolutely.
So it's not enough to just give people the new guidelines
No, you have to get them to buy in.
and actually want to implement them.
It's a process.
What else?
Education, making sure everyone involved really understands ICH E6 R3.
Knowledge is power,
It is
especially when you're trying to put something new into practice.
exactly.
But even with the best training, there will be challenges.
There will be.
What are some of the things we need to be ready for?
Well, one challenge, particularly in this digital age, is balancing flexibility with consistency.
Okay,
So ICH E6 R3 encourages innovation,
right.
but we still need to be able to compare results across different trials.
So if every trial is completely unique, it's hard to draw conclusions about whether a new treatment actually works.
Exactly.
So how do we balance those two things?
It requires clear communication, transparent documentation, and a shared understanding of the principles guiding the research,
So researchers need to be able to explain why they're doing things differently.
and show that their methods are still scientifically sound.
So it's not just about being different for the sake of being different.
No.
There has to be reason.
And that reason needs to be clear.
Okay, I see how all of this fits together.
Good.
The flexibility, the focus on data, patient centricity.
It's all connected.
It's all pointing towards a future
Hopefully a future.
where clinical trials are just better,
Better in every way.
more efficient, more ethical, and more effective.
That's the goal.
But before we wrap up,
Sure.
I want to touch on the global perspective again.
Okay.
We talked about challenges facing emerging economies,
We did.
but what about the potential benefits for them?
ICH E6 R3 could really help accelerate research in these regions.
How
It provides a framework for doing things right
Mhm.
from the very beginning.
so they don't have to repeat the mistakes
Exactly.
that have been made in the past.
They can learn from those mistakes.
Build a better
System.
system from the ground up.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about the infrastructure.
No.
It's about building a culture of quality,
Yeah, ethical conduct.
which benefits everyone. It raises the bar for healthcare as a whole.
That's the hope.
We can't forget about equity and access either. ICHE 6R3 stresses the need for diversity in trials, making sure new treatments are tested in a way that reflects the needs of different populations.
Diverse population.
So it's not just about doing trials in different places. It's about making sure those trials
represent the people.
are actually relevant to the people who live there.
That's a key point that has a lot of potential.
To really change things
For the better.
for clinical research,
Absolutely.
both locally and globally.
Worldwide.
But it's not a magic solution.
Does not.
It takes work.
It takes effort
It takes a commitment to doing things the right way,
and putting patients first.
putting patients first.
Always.
And as the field keeps evolving,
Yeah.
we can expect more changes.
More revisions, more updates.
The journey never really ends.
It doesn't.
But for now,
Yeah.
we've reached the end of our...
I hope our listeners found it helpful.
I hope so too.
It's a complex topic,
It is.
but an important one.
It is. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And until next time, keep those brains buzzing.
Always be learning.